Welcome to Haggy Reads for You on Wolf Spirit Radio. Colleen, Haggy, reads children's stories for the wee ones up to the teens. She also reads books for grown-ups. Tune in, kick back, relax, and listen in. You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio.
Hi everyone, this is Colleen, and this is Haggy Reads for You on Haggy Shack Radio, simulcast to Wolf Spirit Radio. And today is Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. And today I thought I'd start with where I left off last week with The Children of the Law of One by John Peniel. This is Chapter 5, The Religion of Atlantis. Religion for religion's sake. As I said earlier, part of our training at the monastery was to learn about the various cultures and religions of the world. So many of my earliest courses as a novice monk were about religions. At that time, as typical with my young ego, I thought I already knew all there was to know about the subject. But there was really far more to it than I thought. The following chapter is a recollection of a course given by Elder Noah regarding the Atlantean and later teachings about religion. There are a variety of reasons that can be behind the founding of a religion. Some are good, and many are bad. Thus, both good and bad religions have been created. There are religions that started as a means for worship, some to help people improve themselves, spiritually or otherwise. Others were specifically created just to control and have power over the people. But even many religions that started with good intentions degenerated over time into self-serving power structures, whose main function was to control people and make money. How do they control people other than by peer pressure and trying to convince someone about something with a sermon? They vary in their methods and functions. Most offer their members personal salvation through following the religion's tenets, beliefs, rituals, and dogma, and thus they insinuate you will not find God or salvation if you don't follow their particular religion. Most also aim to fill emotional and psychological need in people's hearts and minds. They generally each have their own dogma, answers to spiritual questions about God, who they are, and the rules that we should live by. Some religions control by using people's insecurity, and have even been formed based on the insecurity of an ignorant society. Some were based on fear. There is the fear of hell. Religion is fire insurance. There is the fear of God, which— "What exactly do you mean?" I said. I was insensitively interrupting him before he was about to explain anyway. I was just getting to that. It is religion that basically comes from the idea of needing to worship and serve a god or some kind of powerful supreme being because you actually need to fear him. If you don't, because he is all-powerful and has negative emotional attributes, commits atrocities when angry or jealous, and allows great suffering and disasters when he could easily stop them. So, Noah, what are you saying? Is worshipping that kind of God not much different than being respectful to and paying homage and taxes to an evil king or warlord of the realm? Because if you don't, he may come burn your hut or your fields or kill you and your family, rape your wife, etc.? That's an interesting and insightful analogy. Yes, in fact, that is precisely what many religions did, and how they used the concept of God. But as opposed to being just a king or a warlord, people were told it was an all-powerful being, like super-powerful, evil aliens from outer space, bent on taking over and controlling all the people on this planet Earth. And of course, the next step in such a religion is dealing with the abusive powers of its leaders. The religion's leaders, being self-appointed representatives of such a god, would even torture and burn people alive for not believing or behaving precisely as they dictated, or precisely as the God they represented dictated that they live. Millions of people have been murdered and tortured as a result of this. Like the Inquisition? Let's just say, for now, that people throughout time and of various religions have used their particular God, or even their particular name for their God, as an excuse to control, torture, and murder. That's one reason we prefer to call God the Universal Spirit, rather than anything that personalizes or segregates the concept. But there have been legitimate or sincere reasons and beginnings for religions too. Some have been formed based on faith, or the moral ideas of the religion's founder. Some have been based on visions or insights of a great spiritual teacher. Unfortunately, when the founding visionary dies, usually dogma and the religion take over. Others provide a more direct means for personal salvation within the framework of the dogma. How and why was the religion of the Children of the Law of One started? A religion that is not a religion. Noah paused and stroked his beard for a moment. Well, the Children of the Law of One is a spiritual way, and also a monastic order. I suppose you could say it is somewhat like a religion, but it is not a religion in a couple of very important ways. To start with, none of the above reasons were behind the founding of the children, nor do they play a part in what they teach. There is no control, not even an attempt to influence, only to educate and reflect the truth. To understand why the Children of the Law of One was created, and what their foundations are, we need to go back to the beginnings of human life on Earth. Oh, it sounded like we were going to get into some more interesting stuff. Please go on, I said. I will, just give me a moment. More beard-stroking meditation ensued as he prepared himself to tell us the story. The Fall. This book denotes an entire chapter to the history of the Law of One, from its genesis prior to Atlantis to the present, directly translated from the ancient texts, and my accounts of recent developments. But in the following segment, Noah just briefly describes the specific aspects of that history which led to the creation of the children. You've heard Darwin, you've heard Genesis. Now you are about to hear another theory, the first one that makes sense to me. And according to the Atlantean teachings, Genesis is actually a simplified, loose allegory based on this. The historical records start with the premise that there is one great being, God, Universal Spirit, that is all things, including the universe itself. It divides, multiplies within itself to create us. Thus, our history begins with all of us humans essentially being part of and one with God. The records describe us as being spiritual or angelic beings, free to roam, create, and enjoy the universe. The teachings go on to say that our beginnings on Earth came in 2 steps, a first wave and second wave of human and semi-human, materialization into physical bodies on Earth. At the time, we had the ability to instantly alter our vibration and instantly create anything we desired with a mere thought. It was in this way that we thought ourselves into matter, into material existence on Earth, which began our fall from the angelic state and oneness with God. You have probably heard of mythological beings such as the Minotaur, Centaur, Mermaid, etc. The Minotaur had a bull's head and a human body. The Centaur, a human head and torso with a horse's body. You may also have seen pictures of Egyptian gods with animal heads and human bodies, or animal bodies and human heads, like the Sphinx. In the Pacific regions, ancient drawings and carvings of bird-headed humans can be found on both sides of the ocean. Why do you think so much of this exists? Many legends and myths have some foundation in fact, and this is no exception. The ancient teachings from Atlantis reveal that such creatures did indeed exist, and that their origins were not what you might expect. They were the fallen angelic beings from the first wave of materialization on Earth. Fallen angels? You mean like Lucifer? Well, yes and no. You have a misconception of sorts. That is the personalized concept from the allegory. The first wave of materialization was a terrible mistake. Author's note. This will be explained in greater detail in the history chapter. The first wave beings materialized as partly human, partly animal creatures. This is why in the story of Lucifer, or the various creatures that were called devils or demons or whatever, they appeared as horned, cloven-hooved creatures with tails. The fact is, they were part goat. That is why goats have become associated with the devil also. But evil is an entirely different matter. Think not that evil does not exist, but true evil disguises itself and points the finger at innocence. So Lucifer was not evil? Not initially. The stories you have heard have become terribly mixed up. Even the Bible originally paints him as a great angel. But there was no rebellion or defiance against the will of God until after this fall, not prior to the fall as is often depicted. It was just a mistake at first. Try telling one person in the meeting hall a story and ask him to repeat it quietly to the next, and the next person to the next, until it comes back to you. By the time you hear your original story, it will not even be recognizable. This is why our teaching methods are so stringent. We must keep the truth straight and consistent, and this has been assured by our forebearers. Getting back to the primary teaching today, there were more fallen angels than Lucifer, and they took many different part animal forms. For ease of description, we call the part human, part animal beings that fell into physical vibration or matter during the first wave of materialization humanimals. As soon as the first wave beings materialized in their humanimal bodies, they suffered a great fall in vibration from their previous spiritual angelic state of existence. They instantly experienced a near total loss of consciousness, awareness, and intelligence. In less than a twinkling of an eye, the consciousness that just moments before had encompassed the entire universe and experienced oneness with the universal spirit, God, was virtually gone. The new limited consciousness of these pitiful creatures trapped them on the physical plane of the earth, where they had to live in ignorance and their animal-like intelligence and awareness. They were suddenly isolated from universal God consciousness and trapped in the lonely anguish of separate consciousness. This separate consciousness gave birth to a sort of separate free will, which was ignorantly used selfishly, rather than in harmony with the will of God. Ultimately, they would also be trapped in slavery. Evil is spawned by selfishness, but later, even greater degrees of evil came about, which we will discuss more later. Yet all selfishness and evil has since mistakenly been blamed on those poor, unfortunate first waver humanimals. To be sure, some had horns and tails and cloven hoofs, but they've been used as scapegoats and diversions in order for others, including regular humans, to avoid taking personal responsibility for the real evil, the real devil, which is the selfishness living inside each human who maintains separate consciousness from the oneness of God. Other novice monks in the class, including me, immediately responded with a flurry of questions. What do you mean? How can this be? How did it happen? Slow down, Noah said. One question at a time, please. All will be answered in time. Remember, we were spirits only, very fine, high-frequency, vibrational beings, with no experience in this physical realm. These humanimals came upon their terrible fate because of a rapid, uncontrolled slowing down of their vibrational frequencies, for purposes of materialization of their spiritual selves into the material plane of the earth. It occurred in a way that cut them off from their normal consciousness, like changing the dials on a radio to an area of radio frequency that had nothing to receive. Their internal radio of consciousness was no longer tuned in to God. It was a materialization that went too far, too deep, into the dense, slow vibrations of the physical plane. When the finer frequencies were cut off, they were left cut off from God and the rest of the spiritual creation, and thus the consciousness of the oneness of the universe, the consciousness of God, the universal spirit. This left them with only a separate self-consciousness that lost touch with one consciousness or universal consciousness. Then why aren't all of us still lost and out of touch with God? A couple of reasons. Some of us did not make this fall. Those who didn't fall were still in their angelic state and watched all this happen to the first wavers. Our Grand Master, author's note, later known as Jesus in his last life on earth, organized and led a rescue mission. With their great love and compassion, many of the other angelic beings who had not fallen decided to help the trapped first wavers, even at great risk of the same fate. They became what we call the second wavers. The second wavers knew they could only help the first wavers if they, too, materialized in forms that would allow them to work on the lost souls, the humanimal creatures, in their own physical form and dimension. And the Grand Master and various angelic volunteers knew that in order to do that, it would require lowering their own vibration towards that of the physical plane, and subsequently lowering their consciousness to some extent. They knew this was dangerous, and that they had to be very careful how they did this, and be careful about how deeply they went into physical matter, or they too would become trapped in limited consciousness, just as the humanimals were. Thus, the ancient Atlantean teachings describe how this second wave became the first consciously controlled thought projection, or materialization, of modern human life on Earth. Or at least they eventually became modern humans as they gradually solidified into the material plane from their spiritual angelic state. The ape-like early human form was actually just eventually chosen by second wavers as the preferred type of physical vehicle to model themselves after, because it allowed for the greatest control and manipulation in the physical plane that would be required to help the first wavers. That is why scientists cannot find the missing link, because there simply is none. Because while evolutionary change certainly does exist, our present existence on Earth did not involve evolving for millions of years from apes. Again, if the above theory of creation that is offered by the ancient Atlantean teachings is disagreeable to you, no biggie, that's okay. There are all kinds of theories of creation that people are very intense and pushy about. We aren't. Scientists are supposed to stay objective and stick to proven facts. And if they can't present absolutely proven facts, they are supposed to present their ideas as theories, and only as theories. Yet many alleged scientists have sneakily insinuated and taught the theory of evolution of humans from apes as fact, even when they have a huge gap, a huge missing link in their theory. They have not found a direct ancestral lineage of modern man that connects the whole evolution of apes and cavemen, types of semi-ape, semi-humans. And on the flip side of the evolutionist theories, many religions have followers and thus money and power at stake. Unlike both of those categories, we have nothing at stake, nothing to prove, nothing to lose or gain, since we don't have money or get power from the teachings that we present. While we have personally viewed it as an historical written record, you are welcome to take them or leave them. We really don't care if you believe the concepts of history or creation presented in this book or not. If it rings the bell of truth for you, fine. If it doesn't, that's okay too. We obviously can't prove ancient history, nor do we feel it's important. It isn't important. We really, truly don't care about any of these intellectual ideas, theories, or concepts. We do care about the reality of human life and suffering, now. The things that really impact everyone's lives on Earth. So what we want, and what we really care about, is simply for everyone to be kind, caring, compassionate, and harmless. Is it really too much to ask, even if you believe you are descended from an ape? Is it really too much to ask if you believe God created you out of Adam's rib? Who cares? We don't think it's too much to ask. Regardless of what you believe or don't believe, or have faith in or don't have faith in. The same goes for everything else you read in this book. Who cares? Be nice. Let's all be real caring friends and family. The creation of the children of the Law of One. Before Noah could catch his breath, I began my eager questioning again. So the second wave of materialization began as a rescue mission, an operation of sorts, to save the humanimal beings who fell in the first wave? Please tell me more about who organized this, and how could they do anything about it? Who we will discuss later. Please let me finish relating this part of the teachings. In order to accomplish this rescue, as you called it, 2 things had to be done. 1, methods had to be devised that would help the humanimals regain their spiritual consciousness and awareness of oneness with the universal spirit. And 2, methods had to be devised for the second wavers to maintain their spiritual consciousness and awareness of oneness with the universal spirit. To both these ends, second wave beings founded the spiritual path of the children of the Law of One and created the methods and teachings that are still in use and valid today. Thus, the spiritual order of the children of the Law of One was founded with a very specific and unique purpose. And while this order included aspects of what would later become numerous religions, the children of the Law of One was unlike any other religion that would ever appear on earth, and remain so. It was not created to fulfill a need in people's hearts and minds, nor to strike fear into their hearts, nor to worship anyone or anything, nor to answer the spiritual questions that arose in the spiritually ignorant masses, nor to control those masses. It was created before all those issues even existed. So the children are not really a religion in a sense? No. By many modern definitions, it could be considered such. But again, the whole point of the children's materialization was to rescue their trapped kin by returning the first wavers to their angelic state of existence and awareness, universal consciousness. Thus, the whole point of the children's spiritual path was to be able to enter the material plane, so they could help the first wavers, while maintaining their own spiritual consciousness and angelic state, so they wouldn't get trapped also, if I may continue. Falling again. As the second wave rescue mission gradually descended into materiality and human form, some of them, lured by selfish desires, turned away from the children's spiritual path. They then lost spiritual awareness and separated from oneness with God. Ultimately, this division created 2 religions or philosophical groups in Atlantis with very different purposes and politics: the sons of Belial and the children of the Law of One. The sons of Belial mimicked the children in many ways, even in the sense of being spiritual or religious. But their religious practices were mockeries of true spirituality, phony, empty, and self-serving. They would use prayer and visualization to attain whatever they wanted, and they turned a blind eye to what the repercussions of getting what they wanted would have on others. Some popular present-day religions are offspring of the Belialian religion, and then there are the secret societies that still practice their original ways. In Atlantis, the most significant contention between the children and the Belialians was over what to do about the humanimals. The humanimals were easily controlled by the powers of the second waver's mind, and they could be made to do anything just through visualization. Since the Belialians had turned away from their awareness of oneness with God in favor of selfishness, they wanted to use the humanimals as pet slaves. The children, however, still wanted to help return the humanimals to their higher state of consciousness. Thus the children also became activists, and their goal as a group movement was still to free their trapped kin. But now, they also had to contend with other second wavers who had gone bad. So, Noah, did the children win out over the Belialians? There aren't any humanimals walking around the earth anymore, right? Were they all killed or rescued? I'll answer that in a moment, but first, let me say that even the best of the children of the Law of One eventually succumbed to some degree to the separation from the Universal Spirit. But that is another story, which involves the allegory of Adam and Eve. Now, to answer your question, while part of the children's goal was eventually achieved, the humanimals were freed from their animal entanglement after the destruction of Atlantis. Freedom from darkness and slavery has not been fully accomplished. The battle continues. As far as the first wavers go, reincarnated humanimals still walk the earth in normal human bodies. You've seen them. If you are observant, you can see subtle animal traits, mannerisms, or facial appearances of many people of the world. But humanimals or not, the age-old struggle between the children and the Belialians, the struggle of freedom against slavery, still continues. These days, slavery can be in many forms: traditional, economic, socio-political oppression, imprisonment, and mental programming. The world is basically populated by 5 groups: the children, Belialians, reincarnated lost soul, first and second wavers, and the enlightened. Most from both the first and second waves are still separate in consciousness from the Universal Spirit. That makes them easy prey for the Belialians, and they either become their pawns in one way or another, or their slaves in one way or another. Author's note: in previous editions of this book, the only description of Belialians was that of the old teachings. This left many people confused about who and what they were, and how they look in modern times. Belialians are not some kind of genetic creatures who have physically lived and survived for thousands of years. Like all of us, they have continued to reincarnate and live in modern human bodies. But they are so evil, those of us who are sensitive to it can sense or feel that. This can sometimes even be physically or intuitively seen as being reptilian-like, or as the old teachings call it, lizard-like. But whether you see or sense this yourself, you can know them from their agenda. Lifetime after lifetime, they maintain their maniacal drive for power and agenda of slavery and domination. Many of them are the people who run the world. The upper echelon are the real power people pulling the strings behind the scenes. Like initiated monks of the children, the higher level Belialians are totally conscious and aware of who they are and what they're doing. The middle and lower echelon are sometimes in the forefront or in the public eye, functioning as political, military, or business leaders who are apparently not being told what to do, yet they really are. Of course, some leaders are just pawns and not consciously aware of who they serve and wouldn't care anyway. Belialian heritage in their families, train them and continue to pass on their traditions. They go to the best schools and join the right special fraternities and sororities. They are trained in the ways of using visualization and ritual to practice their dark magic. They also want more power and money. They want to maintain economic slavery and child labor slavery in the world, and even worse. They want a state of total monitoring and control of all people, and they've been making great strides in this. They will use physical force to dominate and control if necessary, but mental programming through education, media, peer pressure, or other means has been extremely successful, and parents continue to pass their own programming on to their children also. Examine world history, and you see these struggles continuing through time, entire groups of evil oppressors trying to enslave. We have continued to fight them, and they continue to fight us. Just as many of the scientific advances have come from reincarnated Atlantean scientists, so too have those with thirst for power and control at any cost come from reincarnated Belialians. They continue to develop more sophisticated ways to keep people under their control. So how do you identify them? Again, you can feel it, and sometimes see it when you look into their eyes. But anyone whose agenda is to control others is either Belialian or one of their pawns. They care only about themselves, and would be willing to harm anyone, or even everyone, on the planet, if it helps them get more power. And they can do this all with a big smile and warm handshake, which many people buy into as being a nice person. Ask yourself if this could be true, and feel the response from your inner voice. Noah continues. So our religion and work continues on. And now, because of the time and situation, you, he pointed at me, will soon be publicly revealing the teachings of the children and heralding the coming spiritual changes. Remember, because of the unique nature and purity of the Atlantean children's spiritual way, it is as valuable today as it was then. Their teachings and methods can help anyone return to the universal spirit, achieve enlightenment, and live in harmony with universal law and universal will. Thank you, Noah. It was my honor to help you. And with that, he bowed and kissed my hand with a feeling of love and respect that one might only expect to see offered to his teacher or the head of the order. It was rather shocking to me because I felt I wasn't worthy of it, didn't deserve it, and that it wasn't appropriate for someone of my humble station. But he was honoring who I was inside, which at the time I didn't really see in myself, even though my ego thought it did. Nevertheless, it was there, just waiting to manifest. Author's note. Now, as I deal with my students and others, I also see who they really are inside, their potential, and support that. We relate to that as well as their present level of consciousness, to reinforce and strengthen that inner being, while attacking and starving the selfish, separate self in our constant function and duty. Then Noah put his hands together and made a gesture of spiritual respect to the other novice monks in the chamber, and crawled off through the little door. Crossing cultures. The next day, Noah discussed more about different cultures and the religions of spiritual traditions of various cultures. Some spiritual traditions are so rooted in the culture they're from that people from foreign cultures or lands find them difficult to adapt to. Sometimes there are even language barriers and cultural customs that have become part of the religion. For instance, some paths require learning or chanting in Japanese or East Indian languages, rather than translation of those languages. Many require performing or participating in rituals that are unique to a foreign culture, even though they evolve specifically because of those cultures. While some paths have legitimate reasons for such things, most do not, and their requirements are limiting, and often nothing more than dogma and cultural bias. Boy, I can relate to that, Noah. A year or so ago, I entered a Zen monastery in the U.S. for about 6 months, and they did everything in Japanese, and in Japanese style, and wouldn't explain to me what the traditions of the Japanese chants were. Even still, I liked a great deal of it, and I definitely got something out of it, but it just wasn't ultimately my right path. No, it is a very good path, but clearly this is yours, if for no other reason than to teach me patience. What? I was just joking, younger brother. You had a good point. It's just that you are here for me to learn some things, just as I am here for you to learn some. But you are ultimately here for the world more than I. But let me get on with what I was saying. Unlike other traditions and religions, our spiritual and philosophical teachings lack any emphasis on religious dogma and have no cultural embedding. The teachers are from every part of the world, and the universality of the teachings and methods easily adapt to those individuals from any culture who have an open mind and are truly spiritually inclined. Thus, it is a path that is readily accessible and useful to people from any land, if they wish to take advantage of it. To someone like me, who had previously studied many religions and cultures, the teachings crossed over seemingly opposing religious boundaries, with a unifying wisdom. They were also complete, filling in all the blanks left by my previous studies, and tying in the aspects of truth I had found in other paths into one comprehensive whole. A natural spiritual path based on universal laws. My next course involved how the Atlantean teachings came about and what they were based on. It was to be given by the elder monk Zarathustra. I'd heard on the grapevine that he had long ago originally come from Germany. He was quite well studied and intellectual from what I'd seen of him so far. I liked him, and he even let me be involved in some very sophisticated vibrational experiments he was conducting, which gave me the foundation for my later vibrational studies and developments. He had a great scientific insight into such matters, and was perfect for teaching this course. The beliefs and teachings that the children of the Law of One had, and have, were not formed based on faith. Most of the bases of them came from Atlantis, and thus to us. Our knowledge, philosophies, and practices are simply gleaned from the scientific facts of universal laws that govern all things in the universe, including the use of the mind and energy. They are merely the result of observations of the universal forces that are involved in the practical applications of our spiritual and physical existence. Thus, even today, understanding the substance of even the ancient beliefs requires no faith, but rather a certain quality of intuitive logic. In fact, the path urges us not to take the teachings on faith, but to experience God and higher consciousness directly. That way, we can really know rather than just taking something on faith and hoping really bad that it's true. There is no more powerful way to change your life in a real and lasting way than to directly experience universal consciousness, and thus experience and know oneness with the universal spirit, God. The teachings both give us methods to expand our awareness and directly experience God and universal consciousness, while also explaining to us the effects of universal laws in simple terms, even if the law itself is difficult to understand. That statement was difficult to understand, Novice Vicente said. Okay. For instance, you may not understand the complex laws of gravity that physicists grapple with, but you can understand how Newton's observation of an apple falling from a tree led him to a scientific conception of what goes up must come down, right? Yes? More simply still, your own experience with the law of gravity has taught you about the effects it has on your life. For instance, you wouldn't ignore the law of gravity and walk off a 30th floor balcony. Yet how many people ignore even more important universal laws because they don't really understand their effects factually? So the ancient Atlantean teachers offer us a way to understand the effects of the universal laws on our lives, and thus a way to benefit from them. Yes, I understand you now, but I want to learn more about spirituality, not physics. True spirituality is tied to universal laws, though, and if you want to consider that just plain physics, fine. But this scientific approach doesn't mean that the path of the children is a cold and clinical one. Far from it. Nowhere else will you find more emphasis on compassion and love. Instead, the scientific basis in the teachings makes the ways and beliefs of the children of the Law of One more simple and unique. As opposed to other religious orders, it is a natural religion, or more appropriately, a natural spiritual path. It is natural because it is based on nature, not just the nature of this planet, but the nature of the universe. It was founded on an understanding of the way the universe functions, and endeavors to apply the laws and flow that govern it to human conditions. The ways of the children were thus developed to ensure that we are in a proper place in the grand scheme of things. Rather than encouraging blind faith to an unknown God and a dogma, it encourages knowing and experiencing the universal spirit yourself and becoming one with it. By these very virtues, it is not as much a religion as it is a way of becoming one with all of creation and the Creator, both. Nor is it just physics by any means. This is not your garden variety religion, and it has a beautiful simplicity to it. Science magic. One morning I decided to explore a bit of the Central Pyramid, just to check out some of this incredible thing. I was walking up to one of the chamber halls there when all of a sudden I saw a strange moving light coming from a small side tunnel. Before I could even look into it, Zen Uru came crawling out. He was one of the initiates at the monastery, an adept monk, who was the personal teacher of many of the elder and novice monks who worked with the monastery's energy systems. He was holding a sort of lantern flashlight, which explained the strange light. From day one, I had heard the phrase science magic used around the monastery. Sometimes it was referring to the monastery's technology, but sometimes it was regarding the creation of our personal lives. But when the term was used in reference to the monastery's technology, it was often used in the same breath as the name of the adept Zin Uru. I had also come across reference to science magic in the ancient texts in the library, but it had not been explained to me in any of the courses yet, so I decided to ask him about it while I had a chance. I didn't know if he'd have the time or inclination to speak to a monk like me, but it was worth a shot. "Zin Uru, if you have a moment, could I please speak with you?" A moment, I suppose I do. Yes. No. It's gone now. Sorry. But yes, I'll speak with you now anyway. Can you tell me about this science magic I keep hearing about? No problem. It has been said that all the teachings of the children of the Law of One are based within science magic. Have you heard that? Yes, I think so. You think so. Very well. Well, they are all based on it. Let me explain the history of that. To our ancestors, what many consider the mysteries of life were not confusing or complex, but simply a matter of applying their understanding of the universal laws. I just had a course about that. Good. Then you'll save me some time. Our Atlantean ancestors easily manipulated vibration, using thought, within a framework of scientific facts. God and spirituality were not vague concepts. The universal spirit was not unknown to them, or some being that was out there somewhere. And magic and miracles were not just something that existed in fairy tales and religious parables from days gone by. They were the scientific workings of spiritual forces on physical matter. Spirituality, as well as materiality, and physical life were all simply based on scientific facts of universal laws. For instance, they understood that psychic phenomenon, electricity, magnetism, gravity, light, sound, space, time, and such, were all related, and aspects of the same thing, and all followed universal laws. The barbarian cultures that lived around us or came into contact with our ancestors couldn't understand these things, so they just lumped it all together as magic. Some mysterious something that could only be created and wielded by gods, devils, or witch doctors, with strange powers and rituals. But what gives anything the appearance of magic, if not deceptive illusions or tricks? What is real magic other than creating or altering energy? And matter which is comprised of energy. So, in a very real sense, much of what we do is magic, but it is based in science and not superstition. Thus, science magic is inherent in the children of the Law of One's entire approach to life and religion. Visualization, for instance, works like magic. You see it happening, and it happens. Visualization is used successfully in everything, from Zen archery to healings, and all such things have that appearance of working like magic. Here, let me give you a little demonstration. He had me stand behind him and lift him up by the waist. It was easy. Then he said, "You should be able to do that again, yes?" "Of course," I said. "Then do so." I tried. It was like he was holding heavy weights or glued to the ground. I managed to budge him, but it took all of my effort and strength, whereas It was easy just a moment ago. How did you do that? Simple visualization and energy. One aspect of science magic. You will learn it in time. And if I had wanted to really put my mind to it, you wouldn't have been able to lift me at all. That's incredible. That's nothing. But while our ancestors achieved wondrous things with their science magical tools, it is not any more mysterious to us than defecating is to the uninitiated. To us, this use of the mind to create physical reality is just a simple fact of universal law science, and a very fundamental one. This also applies to everything else in the children's early days on Earth, such as their use of pyramids to provide power to vehicles and buildings without any visible connection. All their understanding of God, spirituality, and the matters of day-to-day life are based in this knowing that real magic is science, and real science is magic. This lamp I am holding, for instance, it has no batteries like they use in the outside world, and yet it is powered. By what? Something you can't see, and you don't yet understand. Is it magic? I guess so. Is it science? I guess so. Which reminds me, I have some repairs I'm in the middle of. Okay, I think I'm going to take a break here and put on a little music, and I'll see you on the other side.